Evening, everybody. Thursday evening. It's fancy seeing all of you guys here. Typically don't see me on a Thursday, but this is not a typical night, not a typical situation. We got a lot of cool things to discuss, to do tonight. Got a lot of good whiskey to drink. We'll get to the Friday shenanigans tomorrow. But tonight we have some Thursday shenanigans because we have a very special bottle to talk about. Very special bottle. Eric Church was like, hey, I want to get in the whiskey game. And we just so happen to, I don't know, have a guy who blended this son of a gun together. And we're going to talk about it with none other than the man himself, Ari Sussman. What's up?
Great to see you.
How's it going, man? Here we are.
What an intro. Yeah, no, I'm happy. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
I thank you for coming. Thank you for hopping on. Thank you for taking your time out to honestly just drink whiskey with me.
Pretty much just hang out for a little while. Yeah, that's exactly right.
So yeah, we're tonight, guys. It's gonna be all about. For one, we're gonna do a lot of talking about this sucker right here. We're gonna do a lot of talking about Ari, but we're also just gonna have a good night, hanging out together, drinking some drinks on a Thursday evening. I hope you guys go get something in your glass because we got a lot to talk about. We got a lot to cover, Ari.
Yeah, yep. Many roads to cover. Yes, that's right.
Speaking of many roads, and we just talked about this. I want to start on how did you get on the road that led you to whiskey? Because I would argue that if someone read your resume, they could say the most interesting man in the world.
Right.
I'm just saying, man. I'm just saying. I mean, you've lived all over the world. You worked in the vineyards. You've raised ostriches. You've blended Eric Church's whiskey. You've done a lot. So how did you get here?
Yeah.
Where did it start?
One of the interesting things about the whiskey industry is that there are so many roads lead folks into the whiskey industry, and because our industry is pretty young in a lot of ways, unless your last name is very recognizable, right? Unless you could go to any liquor store and kind of read your last name on the bottle, the chances are you've come into this industry through maybe a back door of some kind. That's definitely true for me. And depending on how far back you want to go. But basically, in my youth, which at this point was like 20 years ago, I spent a lot of time traveling, working on jobs, inhaling books, trying to live interesting experiences, and tried to meet people along the way. And one way of saying that is it wasn't single-mindedly sort of professionally influenced in the decisions that I made. I was looking to have sort of a multitude of experiences, and that ended up leading me to some fantastic experiences, meeting wonderful people. And just to highlight a couple of them, I ended up in France making wine. I really didn't like the job that I was in when I was in my sort of early 20s. I worked at the state capitol. I was actually pretty miserable. And
state capitol,
right?
Yeah. Oh, you keep hitting boxes. Like what?
I thought I wanted to be a policy analyst at one point, and I love policy and I love analysis, but it turns out that working in the state capitol wasn't really revving me up in the way that I hoped it would, and I didn't like it at all. And right around that time, a good buddy of mine had a grandmother who owned a bed and breakfast in France, and she needed some help working at the bed and breakfast. So I quit my job and moved to France and got a job helping out at the bed and breakfast.
No, that's awesome.
It was incredible. Like, it was amazing. And if anybody ever gets that opportunity, I strongly advise that you take it. But I didn't speak any French, and I didn't have any money, and the job didn't pay particularly well. So I got a job down the road at the winery in the vineyard down the street. That actually ignited a passion for making wine. Once I got in the vineyard and was pruning grapes and waking up before the sun and working with migrant workers from all across North Africa and Europe and working long hours, and it's really laborious. Like, it's if you think that working in a vineyard is a romantic, fun thing to do, you get dispelled of that illusion very quickly. It doesn't take more than, a morning shift before you're like, oh, okay, this is not romantic, but it's hard work. But it's the kind of hard work that you can fall in love with and kind of go into a meditative trance, and you're working with nature and you're working with people from all over. I just fell in love with it, and I ended up staying for a bunch of months. And then going back the following year, and I really fell in love with winemaking. In France, in the back of sort of the cave, the cave where you do the fermentations, there was this old, dusty, looked like a washing machine, but it was their old still. And that was the first time I ever saw folks distilling brandy from wine. And knowing what I know now, I probably wouldn't have gone too close to that still, because it was a bit of it wasn't up to code. It's a nice way of putting it.
They didn't have regular inspections on that thing, huh?
Different, right? Sort of different culture, different, exactly. Probably hadn't had an inspection on it for I'd say decades, but it produced this absolutely beautiful spirit. Like, I don't know if you've ever had brandy or whiskey straight off the still, but what goes in the still is, in the case of brandy, is wine, and we know what wine tastes like. And you put it through a still and you heat it up, and what the spirit does is it really concentrates not just the alcohol, right? That's just part of it, but because so many aromatics and oils and things are more soluble in ethanol than in water, as that alcohol comes over, you have these concentrations of aromas and flavors that you never get in a wine. It's sort of like a highly compacted wine. And I'd never had brandy off a still like that, and I just fell in love with it. It was really, really interesting. And that sort of was we all have pivot points in our life, like moments where you smell something or taste something or meet someone or walk into a room, and it alters the direction of what you're doing. And
Uh-oh, did we freeze? Uh-oh. Ari, I don't know if you can hear me, but I think you froze. You've frozen. Whoa, he's back. He's back.
Hi.
There we go.
Sorry about that.
Hey, technology is great until it is not great.
Yes. How long do you think I was talking just to myself?
It was only about 20 seconds.
Wow. Weird. Okay. Sorry about that. Well, I don't know where I was, but I was basically talking about how you find yourself in a room and your life can change. It's a pivot point. And I've had a bunch of them since then. But smelling brandy coming off of a still made me realize that distillation was just absolutely fascinating. And as it happened, I came back to Michigan, where I'm from. And at the time, really the only place you could go to learn about distillation was Michigan State University, where I'd gone to college. Because a fantastic human being, the late, great Dr. Chris Berglund, the founder of the MSU, the Michigan State University distilling program, started the first business incubator and business accelerator for craft spirits in the United States. So we were able to have at Michigan State, I went up there, I met Dr. Berglund. He ended up hiring me, and I worked there for 5 years with some of the most remarkable people in the entire industry. Folks like Johnny Jeffrey, who has been at the forefront of the craft distilling movement really for 15 years. Folks like Justin Aiden, who is the head blender at Stranahan's in Colorado. and so many brands came through Michigan State University to be developed. And because of Dr. Berglund, I was able to sort of assimilate a lot of information that I'd kind of picked up when I was a winemaker. Later, I was a bartender for a while. I learned a lot about cocktails and wine, and through Michigan State University, was able to kind of take that that knowledge about bartending and about winemaking and really start applying
Checking
it to
another
spirits.
box, huh, Ari?
Yeah, well, they're all related.
No, it totally is.
They're all related, and we'd hope that actually these traditions would start borrowing from each other, cross-pollinating a little bit. It turns out that that brandy makers and brandy blenders in France, where they have a long tradition of blending brandies, they study with perfumers because they want to learn how perfumers start assembling their perfumes. It was just so fascinating to start getting into spirits and learning how much room there was for kind of messing around, because of course in the United States we've been really slow to the game in distillation. After Prohibition ended in 1933, we had such consolidation and homogenization of the spirits industry, and we've just really pulled out of that recently. American whiskey was a sort of very narrow category for a long time. Really wonderful spirits for sure, but in terms of the breadth of creativity, American spirits has not been anything like even Scotland, which has so many different styles of whiskey in a very small geographic region. We don't have really much of any. We don't have that range.
That's honestly something I haven't really thought about in the grand scheme of things. I mean, those guys over there have been doing this, like, who knows? I mean, I'm sure there is an answer to that, but over here, I feel like only now are we starting to see kind of the emergence of like American single malt is kind of kicking off. It's been just this one track spirits since Prohibition. Really?
Yeah, right. It's really been the American whiskey scene has been really dominated, obviously, by bourbon, primarily from Kentucky, which is a fantastic spirit, obviously, but it's just one category of spirit, right? And then there's been some other. There's certainly light whiskey has always been commercially popular, if not like the topic of conversation, sort of bourbon light. Rye whiskey was obviously popular prior to Prohibition. But it's only recently in the past 10 years or so seeing its resurgence.
Yeah, I feel like it's another huge growth. Like it's growing pretty heavy too.
Yeah, no, I think American single malt and rye whiskey are the two fastest growing whiskey categories in the United States. They're kind of at 30 times less than bourbon, but growing. And what's so interesting, sort of for folks that are looking at innovation in the industry and where American whiskey can go, is single malt and rye in particular, I think offer us some really interesting abilities to get creative.
Yep.
And to look at things like how varietals of grains affect the flavor of the spirit. So there's different types of barley. They all taste different. There's different types of rye. They all taste different. But the consumer is only just now, and by just now, I mean like in the past 36 months, beginning to access those flavors, those characteristics. But I think we're sort of at the very beginning of, hopefully, knock on wood, the sort of expansion in what's available to us.
I love how all of this is like the most foreshadowing into this bottle I think we could get. Just because, like, just reading, you know what I'm saying? Like, reading the label on this bottle is like, it all makes sense. Yeah. I have a question. This is just for me personally, about you getting in like the distillation of brandy. Is that a common practice for like vineyards they also will do brandy with the wine?
Yeah, so it's not uncommon. there's two types of sort of brandies that are generally distilled at wineries. One of them is, brandy starts with wine in the same way that whiskey starts with beer, right? You ferment the raw ingredient. You can go and bottle it like, beer or wine, or you can put it in a still and separate the alcohol and concentrate the flavors and aromas and characteristics. So there's just kind of traditional brandy as we'd think about it, like a cognac, which is just the fermented grape juice distilled. And then, of course, there's the other kind of brandy that most, or I should say many farm distilleries, particularly in Europe, produce. And that's more of the grappa sort.
Okay.
Where you, rather than throw away the parts, essentially the waste stream of the winemaking process, you can almost re-ferment it. Sometimes by tossing sugar on it, sometimes by tossing fermented wine on top of it. But there's so much character in the skins and stems and seeds that, there's this sort of fine brandy, and then there's grappa, which is far more rustic. I think it's also fantastically interesting. In distillation, as much as we'd love to think it's this luxurious, whiskey's this luxury item or whatnot, it's really an agricultural thing. It's really, prior to Prohibition, there were thousands and thousands of distilleries in the United States. Almost every farm either had a still, or there was a still on the back of a wagon that would go from farm to farm, because here are your options in the days before like refrigeration. You farm and you're working all year, and a bunch of your harvest is going to either get moldy, eaten by rats, something nasty is going to happen to it. You're not going to be able to sell it at market. And in fermentation, in distillation, was a way of preserving that harvest, creating something that you could monetize or enjoy, as the case may be. And for the longest time, farming and distillation were completely inseparable. And it's only sort of in recent times with the sort of industrialization of whiskey around the time of Prohibition that whiskey really moved away from the farm. But we're seeing it come back, and we're seeing a lot of the innovation in the whiskey space, whether it's in the rye, whether it's in rye, or whether it's in American single malt, or bourbons that are doing really cool things like using full flavored whiskey grains instead of grains that were developed to feed pigs or livestock. Just seeing a lot of innovation. A lot of it's coming from the craft distillers, the farm distillers. That's really the tip of the spear in terms of, and they're pointing the direction. I think for a lot of the bigger companies.
Well, shoot, I had like another question, but I get so captive. I get captivated just listening to you. I'm not gonna lie, Ari. I was like, I'm gonna just ask this question because I want to know. Then shoot. Well, let's before, because I kind of want to start talking about. I want to get into how you got to this, but there's another question that is just burning inside of me that I have to know about. I need to know more about this. At what point do ostriches come into your life? And what was that? What did you do there?
So when I was ostriches came into my it's funny, these ostriches. I thought I had totally suppressed and repressed my memories of these ostriches, which are they're beasts. They're dinosaur. I mean, get up close to an ostrich, it's like you're looking at a dinosaur. When I was 18 years old, I rather than take the sort of normal path and go straight to university like a lot of folks did, I ended up moving to the Middle East. I moved to a commune in Israel. It's called the kibbutz. And
there we go, checking off more boxes.
Yeah, right, exactly. And one of the many jobs that I was given there was to take care of young ostriches. So the kibbutz is one of the ways they made money is they had an ostrich population, and the ostriches, of course, would lay eggs, and those eggs actually have a lot of value. They're large. They're like the size, not quite the size of a football, but they're like between a softball and a football. And we'd collect these eggs and we'd drill a hole and we'd eat ostrich omelets in the morning. That would be our food. And then the ostrich egg would be exported. And it was, I think we were selling them so that folks could create like Fabergé eggs, like artistic, bejeweled eggs. I think we were sending them mostly to South Africa. So someone needed to steal ostrich eggs from the ostrich mothers. Really, to kind of like when you think about it, a pretty terrible thing to do. But the mother ostriches would lay eggs, and there was it was three of us. It was a 3-man cell, and one person would distract the ostrich, usually actually by throwing rocks at it, and another person, the least fortunate, the most junior person in the team, would run to the ostrich nest, grab the ostrich egg like a football, run towards the fence, the exterior, the fence keeping the ostriches in, throw the ostrich egg over the fence where the third person would just catch it. That was their whole job. And then I was the low guy in the totem pole. I was the guy that had to pull the ostrich egg out of the nest, run to the fence, and then hopefully jump over the fence before the mother ostrich knew what I was doing. Sometimes would chase after me. Never kicked me, which would have been really bad. And they gave me the job because the guy who had my job before got kicked. And I think he like broke a rib or something.
So that's why it's the low man on the totem pole is like, you are in the most danger. This dinosaur is going to be chasing you.
Yeah. So anyhow, I still, these for a long time, these ostriches haunted my dreams, as you can imagine.
Wow.
And, you wake up in a cold sweat and you think, you had a dream that 100 mother ostriches were chasing after you or something. But, yeah, it turns out it's an eccentric thing from our point of view. But listen, there's whole massive swaths of the earth where being an ostrich farmer is not weird or abnormal, or being the equivalent of an ostrich farmer, whatever it might be. There's so many interesting and odd jobs out there. I think going and having those experiences, particularly when you're younger, can be, hopefully character building in a good way. And not in a negative, destructive way. But yeah, so the ostriches were there as part of a larger experience of living on a socialist commune, halfway around the world, and working with some really incredible people and working with some ostriches too.
That I've been pondering all day, like what your answer was going to be to that. I wasn't expecting it to be like, well, we sold the eggs. Like, people buy the empty egg shell? Yeah. I was starting to think like, we don't really know what's in a chicken nugget. We don't really know what bologna's made of. I was thinking it might be ostrich. But the selling of the shell? I mean, you don't eat the ostriches, right?
I never ate ostrich, but people eat ostrich all the time.
So that would be a fine thing to do over there?
Yeah, next time you eat a piece of chicken breast, turn to the person next to you and say, it tastes like ostrich. And you would be telling the truth. So
interesting. Wow. Okay.
An ostrich is like kind of a big chicken.
Yeah. Wow. Crazy. All right,
I want to give a shout out because there are a couple ostrich farmers around the United States who I've spoken with since that press release about ostrich farming.
Really?
Yeah, because I think there's an RSS feed set up for ostrich farmers or something, and when the press release went out talking about ostriches, of all the things of ostriches, we definitely got some feedback like, we raise ostriches too.
Wow, that's that is funny. I've been pulling up some chats throughout. I don't know if you can see them, but I've been pulling up some people in the YouTube and stuff, and I'm reading everyone's comments and I'm pulling some up. But Nicholas says he ordered some ostrich in Cape Town, thinking it was poultry.
Yeah,
he
what?
Probably thought it was.
People eat
Interesting.
ostrich all the time. It's a great source of protein.
It's very, very interesting. I I I don't know. It like you said, in most parts of the world, it's probably totally normal. I've never seen
Yeah,
one.
yeah. And there's so much that we do that folks from the other side of the world come and say, and they're like, man, these Americans are doing some pretty exotic
Yep.
things. Like those chicken nuggets are pretty exotic when you really think about it.
Honestly, yeah, I'm sure they're like, that's not probably supposed to go inside of a human being.
Yeah, they're like, whoa, those Americans are really brave eating that.
So my next question would be, so all of this has gone on. At what point did you get into the whiskey world? Like what 'cause you had the interest sparked, but then when did it transition into the whiskey?
I became really interested in making whiskey when I came back from France to after making wine. I couldn't afford the wines that I wanted to drink. I wanted to learn more about wine, and one of the best ways for folks to learn about wine is to get a job at a wine bar. Or so I got a job. I ended up managing a wine bar when I moved back from France, and because of that, I had access to all this wine that I could otherwise not afford. And I did wine tastings with all my reps all the time, and because there was a whole beverage program, I started to learn a lot more about the whiskeys. And if you can imagine what a bar looks like, there's a section with whatever 12 American whiskeys. They were, I think, all bourbons. I think
Yeah.
they were virtually indiscernible for the most part. Like, yes, every bourbon is different for sure, but for the most part, the spectrum of characteristics was relatively narrow, particularly compared to like the shelf of scotches, where there were 30 single malt scotches at this bar. And in what you do when you're a bartender is you have to kind of think of cool things to do for your regulars, cool things to do for happy hour to get people to come in.
Mhm.
You have to be creative. And one of the first things I did was, I think I have one here. I grabbed, as a bartender, I got my first graduated cylinder, a 50 milliliter graduated cylinder. And the happy hour became, in 50 milliliters is basically a shot. It's what you get when you pour a drink. It's like 2 ounces. I told my regulars, come in, put $10 on the bar, and you can blend yourself any whiskey you want with the graduated cylinder. So
Nice.
blend your favorite bourbon with your favorite scotch from Isla in various proportions and see what it's like. And each one's $10, right? And it became, for me, I learned about whiskey blending by charging my favorite customers $10 to make their own drams. And I would always take a sample. And I was like, oh, it turns out if you're blending in an Isla whiskey, you don't need more than 3 or 5% to get the characteristic that you might be looking for. But if you want to blend, a wheated bourbon, put that up with a scotch from Speyside that's going to have more floral and heathered tones. The wheat in the bourbon is going to allow those floral tones to come through more. So I got into like cross-category whiskey blending, just messing around behind the bar with some really, really knowledgeable regulars. And I learned a lot about whiskey from those folks. Later, I wanted to, the whole craft cocktail thing, historic cocktail thing was starting to get going. And it just so happened that in my city, there's a library. It's actually a private, it's like a library under a library. It's a research library that had first editions of some of the oldest cocktail books ever written.
What?
Yeah. A place called the Jan and Dan Longoni Collection at the University of Michigan. It's one of the most extensive culinary archives in the entire country. There's constantly cookbook authors and culinary historians going down there to read primary documents. The Longoni Collection is a treasure trove. And one of the books that I read down there was by a guy named Charles Baker Jr., who was sort of like the proto Anthony Bourdain. He was the drinks writer for Esquire magazine during Prohibition. He left the country, starts traveling all around the world, making cocktails and drinking whiskeys all over the world.
That's awesome.
And I was reading these cocktails that he was reporting back from Morocco and Egypt and Thailand. And these whiskey or these spirits that he's mentioning in the cocktails, I couldn't buy anywhere. They weren't for sale. In fact, most of them had never been made. It haven't been made in a century or so. So when I learned that Michigan State University had a distilling program, I took some of these spirits that I wanted to make. Of course, I knew how to make wine. I'd made brandy. I figured, I can make anything if I have good help. So I went up to Michigan State, met Dr. Berglund, and said, I'd love to recreate some of these old spirits that haven't existed in a long time because the bartenders want them. And that's what started the relationship with MSU, and that's kind of how I got into distilling.
That, you see, Ari, I'm going to go ahead and say it. Most interesting man in the world. Look, that's awesome. That just shows, like, that's like saying, hey, the fact that we've all thought this, oh man, that's hasn't been made 100 years. I wish I could do that. You said, you know what? I'm going to go find someone. We're going to do it. And then you went and found someone and you did it.
Yeah. And well, the lesson is I'm a person with honestly no discernible talent, in not even a ton of fortitude. If you have something in your mind that you want to accomplish, if I can become a whiskey maker, anyone listening to this can honestly be anything that they want to be. Put yourself out there and hopefully have some good luck and meet the right people.
Well, at this point, I got another question that I think is going to lead us into, because I haven't been drinking this. I've been drinking something else. I got this sucker over here. I want to start drinking this. But I got another question that I think will lead into that. So from all of this, I guess my question would be, how then did you create a whiskey for Eric Church? How did that come about? Was that did they come to you? Or was it like, I don't know. What was that like?
So who knows how these things really happen, depending on how far back you want to go. But I got a phone call one day from someone that said, hey, we have a person, happens to be a popular musician. He knows a lot about whiskey, loves whiskey, wants to make his own whiskey. And you want to talk to him about maybe what ideas you might have for the brand if you could contribute. Now, whiskey makers are very fortunate when they get phone calls or sort of headhunted, or if someone who knows a lot about whiskey wants to create something. Sometimes you get a phone call, and ended up having a really nice talk with Eric's co-founder and partner Raj Alva, an absolutely brilliant businessman, serial entrepreneur, force of nature himself. And he said that he and Eric wanted to create a whiskey that knew no boundaries. It was basically the pitch. And they didn't necessarily have an idea of what that meant, but they knew that they wanted that a lot of folks kind of pigeonhole themselves into a single lane. And that can be great, but it can be less than interesting. I think they were looking to explore the world of whiskey a little bit. And they reached out to a couple folks, and I said, let me think about what a whiskey that knows no boundaries might look like. And so what I ended up doing was I went home. I knew some of Eric's songs. I didn't know a ton of his songs. I knew a handful of his songs from the radio. But I went back to my house and I put on my headphones and I listened to basically all of his albums straight through. And I'll be honest, I went in with some preconceived notions. I thought it was going to be a little bit more run of the mill, but it turns out I was moved and inspired by his music. I was inspired by his music. I was inspired by his performance. I was inspired by his lyricism, his ability to craft a song out of words. I love poetry. I love literature. And when I heard Eric, when I really listened, I heard a poet. I heard a performance artist. I heard a composer. I heard a person who was very artfully able to weave together different musical traditions, and who was inspired by different musical traditions, whether it's Scotch, Irish ballads that sort of, in a way, form the basis of a lot of country music in terms of chord changes and melodies and things like that. But in his music, I also heard hip hop and arena rock and soul music and like Stax Memphis sound. It's kind of all in there. And it blew my mind. I almost felt like stupid that I didn't know how much Eric had put into his music, and it got me thinking about that bar, that happy hour that I was telling you about. I thought, what would a bourbon be like that, Eric's music pulls all these musical traditions together, sort of in the form of country music, but what would a whiskey be like that pulled all these whiskey traditions together, but in the form of American music? And I started thinking about the bar, and I started thinking about happy hour and cross-category blending.
Yeah.
And then I thought, like, American whiskey, when you and I talk about whiskey, we're oftentimes we'll mention a mash bill, right? What is the recipe of the whiskey?
Yeah.
Or what are the ratios of the grains? And of course, what's probably the most popular mash bill is in bourbon is probably the 21% rye mash bill, which just over the course of time, a bourbon with 21% rye, generally like 70% corn-ish,
Yeah.
9% single malt. This is a mash bill that dozens of distilleries produce. It's like a uniquely sort of American mash bill. It's heavy on the corn, but it's got the rye for character and spice. Single malt is in there, or I should say malted barley is in there. So I thought, rather than go and source a bourbon, what if we reconstructed a bourbon following mash bills as sort of the guiding principle, but then, if it's 21% rye, let's go find a whiskey made from rye, a rye whiskey, for 21% of that blend. Let's go find something with a lot of corn character. In the case of this spirit, a 99% corn bourbon. And then, of course, for the 9% malted barley component, we thought American single malt, an incredible emerging category with so much potential. And so the idea came about to sort of create a series of whiskeys that would be riffs on mash bills, but sourcing corn, rye, barley. Maybe in the future there'll be sort of a reconstructed wheated bourbon, right, using a wheat whiskey, and being completely agnostic about where we find the whiskey inputs. They can come from anywhere. They don't have to come from the United States. They don't have to come from, the usual suspects. What we're interested in is really, really well-made spirits that could be highlighted by themselves, but then let's put them together. Let's blend them sort of in the form of American whiskey in these mash bill proportions, and see where they take us.
That's you just went straight into into this. I was gonna ask, man, how did you come up with the mash bill or the components of this, and you just knocked it out? Because at first glance, I was like, the front of the bottle, just a blend of 3 aged whiskeys. And I'm like, okay, let's turn it around. Bam, a whole breakdown of some very, very interesting bottle choices. And at first, I was kind of like, you would read them at first and be like, what the heck? Like, what is going on here? And it makes sense. Like, the more you look at it, and especially the way you explain it, it just makes sense. In a fun way.
It's a unique situation where you can listen to music and it actually gives you the idea for a whiskey that is, number one, can incorporate premium ingredients, but that you can also really mix and match and create a whole series of whiskeys out of it. So very excited about not only the first release, that we call it the Journey, not only excited about that release, but this sort of concept is going to allow us to play with different blends, for quite a while. And really, the other thing that it allows us to do, and what we're doing as a company, is building a library of world whiskeys that can then be incorporated in future releases. And so another really fun aspect of this company, and what Eric and Raj and the rest of the team are doing, is we're not just making a bottle and shipping it out and making a bottle and shipping it out. We're actually creating a library of whiskeys that can be blended or finished or released in any number of ways. So they're all top notch in terms of quality, no matter where in the world they come from. They have age. They're produced. They're just flawlessly and beautifully produced. We only buy things that we taste first, and then we bring them in. But building this library, this sort of archive of whiskeys, and then being able to go there and make blends that I've never tasted anything necessarily like them before. That's a real privilege. That's a real honor. And the fact that Raj and Eric would choose to go down a route that's not market tested, that puts a lot of trust in innovation, puts a lot of trust in that the consumer is going to be interested in sort of conceptual whiskeys and in things that that don't fit neatly into the established categories and silos of what things ought to be. Like when we submit a whiskey like this to a competition, there's no category for it. What we're doing just simply is kind of outside of the rules of the road. And the fact that Raj and Eric were down to go on that journey speaks volumes about who they are as people.
Yeah. And honestly, I was thinking of, I've been thinking about this and when I was going to say this, because I've just wanted to say it ever since, because obviously I've been drinking this bottle. I already know what I think about the bottle. The fact that people, I think the consumer sees things like celebrity whiskey, celebrity whatever. If a celebrity's attached to it, they kind of just, oh, it's just going to be well, they went and bought a bottle or a barrel, they threw it in a bottle and put their face on it, and then that's that. The fact that they come to you and said, hey, the only parameter that we're going to give you is make it good. Make something, like, let's just do something and it's good. There's no confinement. There's no, well, it's got to be, you don't have to stay in this lane. We're giving you the full freeway. And I think that's cool. I think that shows that they actually care of, one, we want to put out stuff not just because we want to make more money because whiskey is popular. You know what I'm saying? It's like we care about it and we want to make something that the consumer will also care about. I thought that, I mean, that just stood out to me, especially hearing like they just come to you and said, hey, let's just do something.
They said it has to be good. They also said, and there was one other stipulation, this has to be fun. They were very clear about this point, that it has to be fun. There has to be humor. There has to be quality. It has to be fun. That's a unique perspective in this industry, let me tell you. I mean, it's like you don't get a whole lot of people who put those values at the very front, even before anything else. Let's start with these values: quality, fun, exploration, innovation, challenge the market to be more innovative, to cross categories, cross borders in a way that we haven't, but not for any good reason. We just haven't. We can these borders, these political geographies by which we distinguish, this whiskey from that whiskey. It's from this political geography. And of course, that border of that state or that country is a thing that's really in flux all the time. And it's just a line that humans put there for whatever reason. It doesn't really speak to the spirit itself, and at least in a lot of the places. So, yeah, they were very bold and inviting and generous. And you talked about celebrity whiskeys and how many celebrity whiskeys we have. If we didn't talk about this in the context of who founded it, if you just looked at this bottle, I don't think you'd have any indication that there was a celebrity behind it. Because there's no signature.
Nope.
There's no name.
That was another thing, too, that I liked about it. And when I was thinking about it is look at how many people, no, not even people, how many celebrities get into wine, get into vodka, tequila, whatever, and they just throw their face on it and they say, oh, well, I'm popular enough. People are going to see my face and buy it because, and at that point, if that's your mindset, you could throw whatever the heck you wanted in the bottle because you just think that your name's going to carry you. Whereas this, I mean, I don't know if I'm sure he did, but it's almost like, hey, don't put me on this. This is not about me. This is about kind of just a collective us of creativity.
If you're familiar with Eric's tours and how many artists he brings on his tours with him, and he brings them on stage with him. One through line here is that Eric Church is a uniquely generous human being and a uniquely humble human being. I don't know if there's a lot of folks that have sold as many, 10 million, however many millions of albums he's sold, sells out concerts all over the place. He is someone who, every time I've seen him in a concert, he's bringing up someone to introduce them to the audience. He is really a unique person, and he's brought that really special personality to the whiskey industry in a way that I don't think we've seen before. There's a lot of celebrities who will put their name on a bottle and collect a royalty check, and that's the end of it. Yeah. There's really only one who says, let's break all the rules and have fun doing it, and I'm not putting my name on it. In a lot of ways, I don't know if there's such a thing as an anti-celebrity whiskey, but if there were an anti-celebrity whiskey, which is a whiskey put out by a celebrity that doesn't put the celebrity as the top billing, it puts the whiskey as the top billing. I think Eric and Raj kind of hit the nail on the head with that.
Well, do you want to get into the bottle, because it's going to spawn some more questions? There's a lot to talk about with this bottle.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's drink it, man. Let's get into it. I've had it sitting over. I've been eyeballing it in the background.
I should let you know that I've been sipping mine. I poured it on a single rock. And I've let it kind of come down, mellow out a little bit. It's in the bottle at 115 proof. And I love high proof. What you find, because the bourbon is 7 and 8 years old, which is where I really think bourbon is at the top of its, it follows a bell curve in terms of quality in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And at 7 and 8 years old, the reason we selected that, and we have some older corn components that we'll be using in future releases. But the reason why we started with this is because at 7 and 8 years old, you still get some of that grain character in the spirit. Yeah. It's not completely obscured by the wood at that point. It's in a really nice balance.
Kind of like the middle ground of, like, you're getting best of both worlds. You're getting a little bit of maybe some of the characteristics the grain brings you, but it's not overly oaky at that point. But it's giving you some.
You get the depth from the wood.
Yep.
And then just to talk a little bit more about the components that we put into this, and then we'll get into tasting it and smelling it and all that. The rye component, I'm a I'm a rye geek. I think that, the first time I went to Kentucky and took a tour of a distillery and they told me that rye is the flavoring grain in bourbon, my reaction was, well, just give me the rye. I just want the rye. I don't need anything but the flavor. And it turns out that rye really provides distillers with, I believe, the widest spectrum of flavor, maybe of any of the whiskey grains. And so it was really important that in our first release that we used a rye that really kind of captured the idea that rye is an underappreciated grain, that it can do things that other grains can't, particularly when it's aged for a long time. In the case of this whiskey, the rye component was aged for 2 decades. It's 20 years old. It was aged in Alberta, cold climate. Whiskey ages really differently in a cold climate than it does in a warm climate. It was aged in used barrels, which obviously means that you're going to get more of the grain character. It's not going to be obscured by the
less of
character.
The cask at that point. Yeah.
You get less of the cask, and you get a lot more nuance that you would otherwise you would miss. And so we were really excited. And then the single malt, we use a 4-year-old single malt. Again, really nice balance between the grain. We wanted biscuity single malt.
Yep.
And that's how we came up with the components. We took this 21% mash bill concept and made a lot of prototypes using different inputs.
How many iterations did you have to go through?
Well, you can go through a lot of permutations. We went through a lot, and all of them, everyone on the team sampled, gave notes on. Eric, intimately involved in every step of this process. This is not a situation where we show up on Eric's front porch and hand him a bottle and say, "This is your whiskey."
Here you go.
He's involved in the entire process, which again is yet another way that he's sort of unique in this space. And so, yeah, pour yourself a little if you haven't already.
Oh, I've had mine. Here's something I'm going to point out to everyone is he just talked all of this stuff as if it was a secret, but they put it, I love it, right there on the back, the breakdown of everything that's in this. So reminder, 70% of this blend, bourbon, 99% corn, 1% malt. So like the highest corn bourbon you could possibly be, 7 and 8 years. 21% of this going to the whole 21% rye. We're going to reconstruct it. A 20-year Canadian rye, which is a 91% rye. So very high rye, 20 years old. Interesting. And then the last breakdown, American single malt, 4 years, 100% malted barley. So you're basically reconstructing a bourbon, but with very unique blends into it.
Yeah, the goal is not to make a whiskey that tastes like a bourbon. It's almost to doff your hat to the bourbon tradition. Again, inspired by Eric songs, which sound like country music, but pull in these traditions. This is sort of, if you think about that in whiskey terms, this might be what, this is what we came up with.
Yeah. Well, let's get into this thing. Because it's I've enjoyed this. I've been enjoying this a lot, and there's some crazy stuff that goes on in this glass. I would be interested to hear your take on it. Kind of what got you to get to that point.
Yeah, well, the first thing that got me when I tasted this permutation, the one that we ended up going to bottle, the blend that we ended up going to bottle with, it comes to the nose. The nose, for me, and this is for me, not just for me, for a lot of folks, the nose is really the entrance point for spirits. There are some reasons for that. Our sense of smell, some folks think, is our oldest sense, evolutionarily speaking. That the sense of smell goes, directly into the oldest parts of our brain, the earliest parts of our brain to develop. And because of that, senses of smell and senses of memory are really tied close together. And smells evoke emotions in ways that the other senses don't. So we really wanted to get an aroma that could evoke feelings, emotions, memories. And what I get from this is I get sweetness. I get candy on the nose. I get leather on the nose, like rich leather.
This might sound totally crazy, because I don't know. I come up with some crazy notes. The chat knows I come up with some weird stuff. This is, for one, you can smell something and know this is gonna be. If you smell syrup, you know it's gonna be thick. I smell this and I'm like, this is about to just completely envelop my mouth. I also get this weird, in the best way possible, like butteriness, like I buttered corn, like I'm about to throw this sucker on the grill type of aspect to it. And it's unlike anything I've smelled. You can't smell this and be like, that smells like a bourbon. It smells like its own thing.
Yeah, and hope I believe the aroma's in balance, and it's unique. And you could put 10 whiskeys in front of someone and be able to pull this one out based on the smell. And that's really important to us. And in that corn, that, again, coming back to agriculture, grain forwardness, that was an important component of this.
It's just, man, the nose on this is honestly, it's like, it's so inviting in a way that I feel like For one, I mean, let me just say this straight up front. It's kind of something that I wasn't expecting with the whole, well, this is a celebrity thing. I'm kind of dipping my toe in the water, and then you smell it and you're like, okay, maybe they're not messing around type of thing going on. And yeah, the nose is dead. It's so pleasant. It's so good.
It's not. That's nice of you to say. I mean, that was the intention there. I like. I listen. I love smells. I love visiting perfumers and visiting distillers who keep different spirits around for blending, especially in Europe, where folks have essentially blending components. They think more about, let's build a library of blending components rather than a single spirit that's consistent all the time. Yeah, so that was very much the stated goal as far as aroma goes, is make something that's distinctive and inviting, that speaks to agriculture, but also has hopefully layers in it. And the truth is that these volatile compounds that are hopping out of the glass, different compounds are going to come out at different proof points, which is why I put some ice in here. You don't have to, but even if you splash some water in there, you let the proof come down, you'll be able to smell different things.
Yeah.
Just like you'll be able to taste different things at different proof points. I find that the aroma of this really changes over time and changes based on how much water or ice is added to it, which means it's complex.
Another thing too that I wasn't even, I was kind of saving it for the palate because I know what this does. But you can see the layers of this, of like, well, that I'm smelling this note, and that must be coming from maybe that 99% corn, but there's this other thing that's going on that must be coming from that 20-year-old rye. Because it's like those two notes, typically, I feel like you typically don't get them together.
So I can tell you that a lot of the aroma that we're getting is coming from the rye, even at 21%, which is not a large proportion of the blend. It's almost over-indexed as far as character goes. And the main reason for that is because when a liquid, any liquid, alcohol, water, whatever, when it's cold, it's able to absorb more oxygen than it is when it's hot. This is just thermodynamics of liquid. This is one of the things that Dr. Chris Berglund taught me about. And what he said is, if you age a whiskey in a colder environment, which means you can have up to 50% more dissolved oxygen in that barrel, that oxygen is going to drive a whole different series of chemical reactions than if you were aging the exact same whiskey in a place like Tennessee or Kentucky.
Yeah.
Where it's hotter, where the liquid's hotter, where there's less oxygen. You're not going to have these oxygen-derived compounds being created, including things like esters, these aromatics that develop over the course of a long time in the presence of alcohol and oxygen. So aromas like this, you'll only get from certain, you won't even get them really in the United States for the most part.
Yeah.
Because the United States, you just can't drive enough oxygen into the spirit. So we were really fortunate to find this particular rye whiskey with its really unique characteristics. And then again, it was able to express those characteristics even at 21% of the blend.
Well, I'm about to drink this sucker. So.
There's that too.
Cheers, guys. Cheers, Ari. We have a super chat come in. Mark J. Boyer. Ari is one of the best blenders ever. Cheers, my friend. Great show, Trev. Cheers for your support, buddy. And told you, Ari's killing it. He might not want to admit it, but he is. Let's drink a little whiskey, man. I'm excited to dive into this with you.
Absolutely.
Because, this thing's an interesting beast.
Sit this one for a minute. Let it move around and do its thing, because it's not one thing all at front. It's going to unfold a little bit.
This thing is a freaking roller coaster. You can't. There's no way you could drink that like one sip and understand what's going on. You really can't. I think my thing too is I think the best thing to do is take a sip, let your senses not be shocked anymore, and then go back to it and say, okay, let's figure out what just happened in my mouth. Because that was crazy. This is a question for you. I mean, we can save some questions for the end or whatever, but I thought this was kind of in the middle of it. Bubble bath, bourbon, do they dump the blends as soon as they're made, or do they let them mix for a while?
This is a fantastic question, and more than happy, just like we're transparent on the back of the label, more than happy to be transparent about production processes, because bubble bath, there is not a handbook for the right or wrong way to blend whiskey. We are creating techniques as we go along. We're borrowing techniques of blending from winemakers. We're borrowing techniques of blending from culinary artists and from perfumers, as I've mentioned several times. Perfumers have one of the most evolved and sophisticated blending techniques, catalog of techniques available. So what we do here is we blend each of the three components. They all come in barrels, and we blend them into various vessels, and we let each of the components marry. Now, go through and we taste each of those barrels to make sure that everyone is on spec as far as the parameters of what we're looking for. If we taste a barrel, it's on spec, it goes in the dump tank. And then once we amalgamate all of the bourbon, amalgamate all of the rye, amalgamate all of the single malt, we taste through those and determine, because if you're only sampling individual barrels and not a number of barrels put together, you're not going to get the same characteristics.
Yeah.
So once we blend those all together, then we start making prototypes, basically. And it's important that we say, let's let the spirits marry, which means let them come together. The moment you dump spirits together, if you wait 24 hours, it's going to taste different. They're going to kind of come into harmony with each other. Some of the more volatile compounds, the more sort of harsh compounds, will blow off in ambient conditions. They'll just kind of, you leave the top open, and it's like you let some of the burn blow off, so it becomes mellowed as you let them marry together. And then once we let each of the components sort of mellow and make its own thing, we make some smaller prototypes. And then we put everything together in a tank, in a fairly large tank, the entire blend. We turn on an agitator, and we actually let that sit for 4 or 5 days before bottling it. And the reason it allows the spirits to integrate in a way. Again, I don't know the science behind integration very well, but I can tell you anecdotally that if you taste the whiskey as soon as you dump them all together, might be really good. If you come back 5 days later, it's going to be different. It's going to be mellower. It's going to be a little bit more subtle, but it's also going to be deeper and have a little bit more finesse. So that is the technique that we use.
You might not have to know the ins and outs of why it happens. All you know is that it does happen.
I'd love to know why it happens, because a naturally curious person would be interesting. If you can figure out why it happens, then you can manipulate and play with it, and you can experiment with it. Again, there is so much mystery in this industry, and so much mystery in whiskey. Sometimes you cross your fingers and pray to the whiskey gods that things will be all right. And hopefully, if you've been diligent, if you've worked as hard as you can, if you've spent your sleepless nights praying that your whiskeys are going to be as good as you hope that they would be, the whiskey gods shine fortune upon you.
Well, I'm going to get to what I get when I drink this, because I've been sitting here thinking about it. This thing really takes you through, I feel like, the blend It kind of hits all three aspects in a sense. Like you can drink this and look at the breakdown, and it's like it takes you through the journey. When you get hit up front with the corn, and in the mid palate is just 20-year-old rye. There's no, it's there, but it's like it's incredible how it just is a journey through your palate, and it hits all of those points. It's like it makes sense why you blended them together, especially reading it and hearing why, and then you see it.
Yeah, thank you. That's nice of you to say.
It's all, dude. I'm not kidding, man. It's a fantastic blend. It's kind of, it blows my mind of how, like, what you had to do to find these blends and what didn't work. Like how many didn't work, or well, that didn't work, but I like this. So what do we do to get it to this point? It's really mind blowing to think about, because blending whiskey, I think, it simply cannot be easy. I mean, I've tried to blend 2 bottles in my cabinet, and they're terrible. You know,
it's not, I wouldn't say it's not easy. I'd say there's a process, and you never really know how whiskeys are going to taste together until you blend them. You can't do it in your mind. It never ends up exactly like you thought. So the trick to blending whiskey is to blend a lot of whiskey.
yeah,
And to taste them all, and to write down what you like and what you don't like, and to hone it over time. Whiskey blends cannot be made in a matter of days. It's a process that takes weeks or months, or sometimes even longer. It's trial and error, and it has a lot to do with the diligence of writing things down and going back and tasting. And going back at tasting at different times of the day. I can't really overemphasize how important it is to taste your blends in the morning, taste them in the afternoon, taste them at night. Our sense of smell and our sense of taste are massively influenced by what we ate the night before. Did we have coffee?
Yep.
Was there garlic involved? Did someone have an onion? Do you have a cold? Is the pH of your mouth different than it was at one point in the day? In order to make a blend, you really have to taste it at various times of the day for days or weeks on end.
I mean, honestly, the way you explain that, I mean, it's just like any skill you have. You have to know everything there is to know about that. You have to know what it tastes like at 7 in the morning. You have to know what it tastes like after you ate dinner at night. You have to completely understand this to know what's wrong, when it's wrong, how do we fix it, how do we make it to what I want. You know, like you have to, because if you make these judgment calls off of, well, I just ate some stew, and then I went and made this and I didn't like it, and then you change it, what's it going to change into? You don't even know.
Yeah.
It's I don't know how you do it. I mean, you explained how you did it, but I'm trying to put myself in that situation. It's incredible.
Well, it's incredibly fortunate too, because you don't necessarily have a ton of control. Right? You can come out with a vision. You can work hard to make as many blends as you can, share them with a lot of people. We work with fantastic tasting panels. We work with really talented people who gave honest feedback throughout the process. I can tell you that the initial blends needed work, and you have to surround yourself with folks that are willing to taste something, look at you in the eye, and say, "This could use some work."
Yeah.
Go back, and it's a process, and it's humbling, and you're not necessarily in control of it. So it truly does take an entire team. Making whiskey is something that you really need a whole team of folks from the vision and finance side to the procurement side, the blending side, on the production side. At any stage in the process, the quality can get derailed. So you need a team that is really as passionate about the process as the product, and that everything needs to be done correctly. And really that comes down to the culture of a company, and the commitment of those in the company, for quality, the commitment, of course, to having fun, and to being honest about feedback.
And I think to that point too, I mean, that goes back to what I was saying earlier. Just drinking this, you can tell. I mean, you can tell that, one, first and foremost, you thought what it took to get this to taste the way it does, I think took a lot, and it shows. And I think it also shows on them that they said, hey, do this. You can do this. You can go grab some 20-year-old Alberta rye and throw it in the blend. You know what I'm saying? I think it's reflective, like you said, a whole team.
At some point, someone with some financial responsibility is bound to say, bring me something that's kind of like it. Bring me a comparable. And we had to tell them nobody's ever really done this before. There's not a whole lot of cross-category blends, particularly cross-category blends that incorporate 3 different spirits, of 3 different ages, really 3 different stages of maturity. This is an old winemaker blenders, so one of the tricks we took here, there's a 4-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 20-year-old component in here. And one of the things techniques we borrowed from winemakers, is spirits and wine don't just get better over time; they change, and certain aspects get more interesting, and certain get less interesting. But there are quite a few winemakers out there who will blend wines of different ages, because they will each have different levels of fruit forwardness or oxidized levels. And so I found that wines that blend younger, older wines together tend to have a really interesting complexity. And that's another thing that we were going for here. Like, it's very intentional that there's a 4-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 20-year-old, because having those different states of maturity in the spirit is going to, at the end of the day, lead to a more complex blend.
Now, let me ask you this. This is just another personal question of mine. When you went to go to blend this, I mean, did you already have some of these stocks, or were you like, I have to go and find some? Like, I have to go and find this.
We had to go.
Were you like, hey, I have this. Let's start working with what we got?
No. We went and started building a library of really, really interesting spirits. And
it was like, let's just go get it.
Yeah, and we're still going out. And not only are we going out and finding some really, really interesting spirits from all over the world, we're laying down new fill barrels at multiple distilleries of some pretty unique blends and mash bills. And I think that the library is going to have some very unique, already has some very unique older spirits, but we'll also have some of the more compelling new fill spirit or younger spirit that's going to be aging into maturity over the next couple of years. So we not only have really great partners abroad, whiskey brokers, whiskey producers, but we also work with a number of distilleries around the country to lay down new fill barrels for future releases.
Interesting. Is there, I mean, obviously you're alluding to more of this, but are there going to be different, I don't know, like, this is the Whiskey Jypsi legacy. Is there going to be other spin-offs of that?
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that we came out the gate with sort of a mission, a declarative statement about our approach to whiskey making. But in addition to sort of that ultra high-end, limited edition, rare, one of the things about this bottle, it's very limited amounts. When it's gone, it's gone. And that's just the nature of the beast. the inputs for a product like this are in very limited supply. So the blend itself is going to be in highly limited supply. Once this is gone, it's never going to be recreated again. It'll be gone. It's like a sandcastle. It's like a beautiful sandcastle, and when it's gone, it's gone. But we also want to explore the world of more everyday drinkers and how we can take more accessible whiskeys and make them really interesting and imbue bourbons and whiskeys with characteristics that folks maybe haven't tried before, and go on that kind of journey as well.
Well, you know what doesn't end is the finish on this bottle. That's something that I wanted to point out too, is as I've been drinking this sucker just will not leave your mouth. Is just, I mean, it is all encompassing of your entire mouth. Like even now, it's like it's one of those pours that you pour it and it's kind of like, cool, I'm cool with just sitting here and tasting this residual effect going on in my mouth for the next 5 minutes.
Yeah, I think it has what we call remarkable length, right?
Oh, yeah.
It has this width about it, has a viscosity, so it coats the mouth and it kind of gets all over the place and kind of just sits there, and then it just continues to sit there. So it has this length. It doesn't. There are whiskeys that are very much designed to have a short, quick finish. They invite you to come and have another sip. This one you can really sit with, and it doesn't diminish in the same way that you would expect it to. So do you play guitar at all?
I'm a drummer.
You're a drummer. Okay. There's drum equivalents here, but I'll talk about, solid body and hollow body guitars.
Okay.
A hollow body guitar, if you hit that note, because of the way it resonates, you can have this almost indefinite resonance. And if you take that hollow body and just hit it, it's just going to wow. You'll have this really beautiful long finish, fat tone, in a way that a solid body generally doesn't. And I call this kind of finish a hollow body finish, because it just kind of keeps on going and it doesn't even really diminish a whole lot. It's still there.
It's like it's crazy, and I feel like the flavor is so unique that it's like, as I'm sitting here now, I can still taste exactly what the glass tasted like. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I don't know. It's like imagine eating a new cuisine for the first time ever, and it's blowing your mind. You're like, I've never tasted anything like that. And then for the next 5 minutes, you taste that. This is what it does. It just sits there and just lets you enjoy it.
Yeah. And it's not, you don't have to hurry up and drink it. You can sit there for as long as you want. It goes great with cigars. I don't know if you're a cigar guy. I like the occasional cigar. Goes great with a book and a cigar. It goes great with a campfire. It's a versatile sipper. And sometimes I like it at full strength, 115. And then sometimes I like to bring it way down and just kind of explore the flavors closer to 30% or 60 proof. Because again, it drinks really differently at that proof.
Now, let me ask you this, because as I'm tasting this, I want your input. When you drink this, to me, like I said, it gives you this whole roller coaster of, I feel like up front is hitting me with that corn, and then the mid palate, I wouldn't say it's all the rye. I think the rye is very cohesively blended in, but I can still see it. It's very fruity. It's very sweet in the middle. And then on the back of the palate, it's almost as if I just drank I don't know, like a bourbon that I'm not just used to.
We have a conception that rye is only spicy. And like I said, rye offers a distiller and a blender a wide spectrum of characteristics. Rye can be sweet, it can be spicy, it can be grassy, it can be fruity. A lot of this has to do with what sort of yeast you elect to use for the fermentation and what congeners that yeast
Mm-hmm.
produces, as well as those other reactions that happen in the cask, sometimes over the course of decades, sometimes in the presence of higher dissolved oxygen, which is going to produce different flavors, different aromas and mouthfeels than if you age the exact same spirit in a warm climate with less dissolved oxygen. So personally, I get more of the sweetness and the fruitiness. There is rye spice there. There's clearly some rye spice there, but it's not overwhelming in any kind of way. And it's almost like I feel like the spice gives some depth to the sweetness.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
In culinary, we often love to eat foods that are, that blend two different styles, like sweet and sour, right?
Mm-hmm.
Salty and sweet. We love salty, we love sweet. You put salty and sweet together, like salted caramel. It's a whole different experience.
Yes.
We love hot and sour, right? But you put hot and sour together, it has this whole different complexity. And I feel like the spiciness here, this is almost like a sweet and spicy in a lot of ways, and they highlight each other and to create greater depth.
Mm-hmm. I think too. I mean, you almost like. I'm speaking for me. My palate almost focuses on the sweet, but I feel like if the spice wasn't there, you would notice it, and you'd be like, "That's missing." It would stand out at that point. Whereas I think it's cohesive enough to where it makes sense. Like a sweet and spicy, if you order sweet and spicy and you ain't got the spicy, you would immediately be like, I ordered sweet and spicy. Where's that at?
Yeah.
Maybe I'm ordering it because I love the sweetness. You'll leave the spicy out, I'm going to notice it.
I love Joey's comment here. Yeah. I do think that the whiskey really opens up with the neck pours. For sure. Absolutely.
Okay, so I want you to elaborate a little bit, because I know a lot of people will fresh crack a bottle and they'll pour it. Do you believe when you fresh open a bottle and you pour it, day one, pour one, is it going to change with pour 2, 3, 10?
It's a great question. In the answer to this, it can be quantified. We can do a test with the headspace analyzer. A headspace analyzer is a probe that you put in the headspace of a bottle, and it measures the volatile compounds in the proportions. It's some people call it the electric nose, and it kicks you out a report that says exactly what's in it. I mean, but if I had to answer the question itself, I would say that I'd say that the difference is too minute for a human nose to recognize. And if whiskey tastes different after the first, second, and third sip, it's not because the whiskey has changed. It's because alcohol is a topical anesthetic. And that first sip anesthetized you a little bit, and the second sip anesthetized you more. And it's not changing because it's not changing because humans are super tasters and we can get these minute differences in parts per billion or parts per million in the headspace. It's changing because as soon as alcohol hits us, our body reacts kind of by shutting down a little bit. And if it tastes different between the first and third sip, it's because of the alcohol, it's because of our perception of the alcohol, not the alcohol itself.
I'm going to tell you right now, I love the science behind things, because so many times I feel like I know the answer to things only because I just drink them and I experience it. But to actually hear a reasoning behind it,
might not be the reasoning. Some
still,
scientists might come be like, actually,
it.
The sensory thresholds are such that you absolutely can tell the difference. I doubt that's the case. My assumption is that it is the alcohol that is changing your perception of the alcohol, which is why the sips taste different one to the next.
Now, you mentioned something that I didn't even know about. So you say there's a probe. So there's a probe you can put in the neck pore, and maybe it's too minute for humans to tell, but is there a little difference in the neck of the bottle?
Well, yeah. So the headspace in the neck of the bottle is going to have the lightest compounds from the entire bottle. So, like, if the bottle's sitting there, particularly at a higher temperature, some of the more volatile compounds are going to escape the liquid phase and go into the headspace.
Interesting.
Absolutely. And that's the exact process that we see. You know, there was a question earlier about how long do you let the whiskey sit there before you bottle it? And it's
Yeah.
a similar thing. I mentioned you put it in there, you agitate it. Sometimes you heat it up a little bit. It allows some of the more volatile compounds to blow off, to leave the whiskey and sort of go out. And that's going to give you a smoother, more integrated whiskey. I think that happens in a very minute amount, but I would be shocked if there were a human out there that were so sensitive that you could smell the difference.
Yeah. So that's crazy though. Just to, like, technically, it is true. And maybe do you think maybe people get it in their heads that they say, well, technically that is true, and then you have this, your brain is making you believe what you know is technically true.
Yeah, so like our brains are pretty flimsy computers when it comes to figuring out what's true, apparently. And you know, a lot of what we consider to be true is we're trying to make sense of some perception that we have and fit within some larger framework. And oftentimes we end up shoehorning information and discluding information that's apparent but inconvenient for our theories and all of that. But is there an olfaction device, a headspace analyzer? Absolutely. And not only that, I mean, at a place like Michigan State University or the Beam Institute in Kentucky or Hartwick College or Cornell or UC Davis or some of these, or Gigovan, which is a large perfumery school, you're going to find headspace evaluators, you're going to find mass spectrometers, gas chromatographers, and all kinds of equipment that's used in all sorts of industries to take a liquid and split it into its constituent molecules. So you can recreate things, so you can reverse engineer things, so that you can do quality control, quality assurance on products. It's a really, you know, fantastic technology to have access to. And throughout this entire process, Raj in particular is a data guy, co-founder Raj Alva. He loves numbers and he loves computers and he loves data and he loves science. And we have been sending samples of many of our whiskeys to some of the top spirits labs in the country, including Brewing and Distilling Analytical Services, including Hartwick College, and including Ray Marcelli's Marcelli Laboratories. There are some really fantastic laboratories out there that specialize in looking at whiskey and can take just a couple of drops of whiskey and split it into 400 or 500 unique compounds, constituent compounds, in their proportions. And then you take those proportions and you look at them relative to what are the sensory thresholds. So there are some things that you can have a lot of, but they don't have a lot of smell. And there's some, like sugar, right? If you taste sugar, it's sweet, but if you smell sugar, it smells just like salt. You can't smell sugar. Whereas other things like sulfur, you can smell in the parts per billion. You can smell a little sulfur, you know, down the hallway or whatnot. So the actual quantity isn't nearly as important as the sensory threshold levels.
It's crazy to think that. I mean, it's not. If you really stop to think about it, it's not crazy at all. But the fact that this much goes into learning, into creating, and to fully understand what's going into it. You know what I'm saying? Like, you have all these tools to. It might not be something that will someone like me is going to notice a difference if you did or didn't. But I think it does show in quality of we're trying to figure this out.
We're trying to figure out, and one thing I'll say about all of the tools and technology that we have, it's almost like every time there's a technological innovation or every time a new paper, dissertation or whatnot is written, it just reinforces the perception of how little we actually know. Mm-hmm. Every time you learn something, you're like, oh, I learned one thing, but I just learned about 10 things that I have no idea about. So
learning that uncovered 10 unknown things.
and that seems to be the way it goes with spirits a lot. In fact, we have an industry here that's 1,000 years old, and it's $1 billion global industry with products in every corner of civilization. But we actually don't know very much about it, or I should say, what we don't know far surpasses what we do know. And with all the tools and with all the fine minds and the fine palates, even the folks that have devoted themselves to experimentation in the spirits side, they're learning new things all the time, and there are very few mysteries being solved. There are, in fact, more mysteries being discovered than there's more mysteries being discovered than being solved.
Yep. That's just part of the beast.
It's part of the beast
of discovery.
I should say that, if folks are interested in trying a bottle of this, it is in super limited edition, and it's available at whiskeyjypsi.com. It's available on the website. It's also available on some other websites on the internet. It's available at Coming Whiskey. If you follow Jacob over at Coming Whiskey, who has a fantastic account, I believe it's available at buysomewhiskey.com.
I was gonna say maybe we should we should double check, see if that sucker is on there, because if it's not, maybe we should get it on there.
I think we should get it on there. Another way in which this spirit is really innovative is it's very much an online direct to consumer route to market strategy. It's available in the fine state of Tennessee at retail stores. But outside of Tennessee, it's primarily available online, on the website, and in the curated stores of a few social media personalities.
I'm gonna look, because I feel like if we don't have it, I think we should get this on our site.
Yeah, I think so as well.
I think that would be. I think that'd be awesome. No, we don't have it on there. Well, all right.
We'll get it.
We'll get it on there. So if you guys, there's plenty of places you could go get it, but we're about to get this sucker on the on our page. That's what we're gonna do. Do you want to you want me to open up? I want to if anyone has any questions, drop you some questions, because you've been answering all these questions like amazingly.
Yeah, bring it. Let's keep on talking.
Here's one. Would Ari ever smoke a cigar with his blend?
Hell yeah.
I was about to say, I think I could answer that for Ari.
I love smoking cigars with this blend. In fact, if you go to the website, there's a video that's streaming, and I think there's a video of Eric and I sitting around a campfire at his farm, drinking the blend and smoking cigars. I think, just like whiskey kind of taps into the really sort of deep limbic parts of our brain, I think cigars can do that as well.
Carrie Graham says, Ari, I have a couple cigars for you.
Can't wait to enjoy them. Hope to enjoy them with you, Carrie.
That just escalated quickly. All right, I posted it in there. Drop some questions. You got some questions for Ari. I'm trying to think of some more, because I think I got more questions for you too. Here I guess here's a fun one. We can talk about little Eric Church, I guess.
Hell yeah.
So you said he was pretty involved in this. I mean, is he drinking your prototypes? Is he saying, like,
I wouldn't say he's pretty involved. Eric has strong opinions, strong aesthetic sense as much as anything. He had every single prototype, and he gave feedback. and what I'd say about him is he's not some sort of passive celebrity who rests on his laurels, who came out with one album 10 years ago and still plays the same songs the same way.
Yep.
Eric is a creative force of nature who is, it's hard enough to do one thing well in this world. It's hard enough to be a songwriter or a singer or a performer or a recording artist or sort of a business leader. I mean, at this point, he owns a basketball team as well, and he's starting a beautiful 6-story barbecue restaurant, bar, and concert venue on Broadway, on South Broadway.
Wait, what
Nashville.
the heck?
Yeah, the Eric is an unstoppable force who he's past the point where he needs to do the things that normal people do, yet he continues to release top caliber records year after year with an evolving style. He continues to go on tour year after year, bringing, in many cases, lesser known artists out with him to present them to the larger audience. And he's been involved with every single step of this bottle, including, and we haven't even really, talked about the bottle. The bottle itself, I think, is kind of a work of art.
I was gonna talk about it. This bottle is probably one of the best looking, feeling, everything about it bottles in the game. It's legit.
It's heavy. It has this deep bottom going on.
I tested it. A baseball will fit perfectly in there.
Yeah, nice. And as well as a little cigar.
Don't know why you would do it. Is that why there's a little cutout? Small.
Maybe. It has a hand hammered look. Old school stills were hand hammered copper.
Yeah.
And
you say that.
Yeah, and Eric and I, in the whole team, we talk about what are some of the signifiers of quality, doing things the slow way, the old fashioned way, the like a true artisan with a real skill, not what is it like in the age of mechanical reproducibility. And hand hammered copper became sort of this phrase that we were using, like, is it hand hammered? And so when we were trying to figure out what we could do with the bottle, said, well, let's create a hand hammered texture on the bottle to indicate that what's inside is handcrafted. And I think it turned out really, really well. It has a beautiful cork. There's a couple Easter eggs in the packaging, and we couldn't be proud of the entire package. Honestly, I think that what we were able to do in the liquid concept inside of the bottle is really kind of met its match with the bottle itself.
Yeah, it's honestly the packaging. I'm a total sucker for marketing. I'm not gonna lie, man. Like, you can't. Come on. You can do something cool like this. That's my personal opinion. This is a home freaking run in terms of bottle. If you care about that type of stuff, this is amazing. I'm telling you, there's an intruder in my house. I'm throwing this at him and I win.
It's a bludgeoning tool. And I'm not sure how many people are following us at this point, but here's what I'll tell you, Trev.
We still got a lot of nerds here.
Good. Grab a knife sometime. Pry out this top. See what happens. The metal top. Just see what happens.
This right here?
Yeah, maybe one of these days when you're bored, see if you can't get that sucker to come out. Don't hurt yourself.
This is an exclusive right here.
You getting any movement on it?
Oh, it's coming.
It's not easy.
It's not.
It makes you work for it, but there's a little gem there for you.
This is an exclusive right here.
I'm not sure how many people know this.
It's coming. Hold on, I might have to. Let me do this way. I got about halfway up.
Yeah, let me see if I can't find it.
Paraphrasing. Or phrasing. All right, here we go.
Nothing worth doing is easy, right? So
man.
Yeah, no, it's in there. It's in there. But you keep on messing around with it.
It's like you almost need a second person to help you out here.
No, it's like, oh,
I got it.
for real? What'd you find there?
Wow. I'm just gonna peel the glue off of this too. Very interesting. So I'm gonna show this to people, or maybe I don't know. Maybe I should. Maybe I should tell you go get one and look at it yourself. No, this is an exclusive. People here want
an exclusive. Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't think we've done this before.
I don't think we have, and by we I mean you and me. And all right, here we go. Lives are made for chances. This is on the inside of. This might be the first time this has been shown. Nice. That is literally underneath. I had to pry. Very difficult to pry off, but shoot. You don't even need the glue. It just stays in. We're good.
So that quote, "Lives are made from chances," is a quote from a song called "Never Break Heart." Beautiful song that Eric wrote. I would challenge you, even if you don't consider yourself a lover of country music, you can check out the song "Never Break Heart," and it's a really good example of his lyricism and how he's able to do things, express emotions. He's able to tap into what music can do. I think that song is a really good version, a really good example of what he can do lyrically and musically. It's a beautiful song, and the only indication on this entire bottle that Eric is involved in it is a rare, a pretty obscure song quote on the bottom of a coin that's glued to the cork. So, you know, that's different than emblazoning someone's signature across the label.
I mean, honestly, I was about to say, I think the logo is cool. Block my face. The logo itself. Come on now. It won't do it again. The logo itself is cool. That is very detailed for a glued down coin. And we said it's a coin. I'm going to say the military nerds are inbound. I'm going to have to get, I mean, does Eric Church accept coins?
That's where the idea came from.
I'll send him a coin myself.
He's been presented with so many challenge coins
that he
awesome. He wanted to give a shout out to you guys.
That's cool. I'm glad you told me. Like, who else? Why would anyone like? You know what? I'm gonna peel that out of there.
Yep. And that comes, you know, directly, I think, from a lot of the military folks who have given him challenge coins, and he wanted to give you guys a little shout out back.
That's awesome. See, you know what? I'll be straight. I'll be right up honest with you, Ari, because I'm talking to you and not Eric Church himself. I was like you. I don't listen to a lot of country music. I know Eric Church. I know a couple of songs. But I was like you when I was like, okay, Ari's coming on the stream. I'm just going to listen to Eric Church. And the one thing I noticed, maybe it was a preconceived notion of, oh, well, he's a popular country artist. It must be just your generic crap. I mean, I'm just going to be honest with you. And I was kind of, like you said, I was kind of taken aback by how creative and you could clearly, as a musician, I mean, I've made music. As a musician, I can see the pieces that he puts into his songs. And I was like, okay, this isn't just your country pop star that's on the radio right now. it's someone who cares about making music.
He cares about making music. He changes the arrangements of songs. He's a true artist and creative force. And as you can see, I mean, you saw the logo. This you can see the eagle logo. I have it on my shirt as well, right? And that's a W and a J when you look at it. So that's the initials of the company itself.
Whiskey Jypsi.
So there's no shortage of creativity in every single aspect of from the bottle to the liquid, and everything in between has been considered, debated, and it's just really interesting choices. And it starts from the top.
It looks like a choir coin that comes with merch packages. It says Jenny.
Do you know what the choir is?
What?
Gonna give a shout out to the church choir.
Come on, drop it.
The church choir. You know, there are Swifties, and there's different musicians have their own fan clubs.
Okay.
And Eric has the church choir.
There we go.
They are phenomenal, and they are legion. There are many of them, and they are passionate, knowledgeable. They show up at the shows. They have vibrant social media communities. They're fantastic, and the church choir is this fan group that has a deep appreciation of what Eric sort of does on a day in, day out basis. They know all about his concert posters and how he employs artists to create unique concert posters for every single show. These are things that people don't need to do. If you're a rock star, you don't need to do that. The reason you do it is because you're committed to artistry, committed to artisans.
Yeah.
Artists employed. You want to keep the world, creative and beautiful. And this whiskey is just, it's a natural outgrowth of that mentality that Eric has in his music and his merch and the church choir and everything.
Well, I think that's honestly really cool because, like I said, Jenny obviously is a huge Eric Church follower, but we both appreciate this in different ways. I just thought that looked cool. You know what I'm saying? Jenny's like, oh, hey, that's the choir coin. And we can both enjoy it in a different way, if that makes sense. Like, I'm looking at this as an outsider perspective. This is awesome. This is really cool. And then you can see this as, oh, hey, maybe I'm not into whiskey, but maybe I can be.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I can dip my toe into it. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, that's right. And listen, everything you just said, you're spot on, and it's one of the reasons why this has just been so much fun. Right? It's so creative and inclusive, and there's just a lot of good people at the table making great choices, debating choices, and then executing really properly.
All right, I got a couple more for you. I don't know. Cammie Bright says, "Where can I buy merchandise?" I don't know if she's talking about me. I don't know if she's talking about Whiskey Jypsi. But
I could speak for the spirits company. It's coming. Keep on looking at the website.
That's what I'm saying, because I was like, Ari, man, I might need a T-shirt with that logo, man.
Or a hat, maybe. Yeah, or a flag.
I like hats. I love hats.
Yeah, it's coming. It's coming, people.
There we go.
We're all excited about it.
Where's this other one I wanted to read? Was there any other Easter eggs? I thought I said someone was talking about something with the back of the label. Is there another Easter egg on this?
It depends on what you define as an Easter egg.
Or is there just something else fun that's on here?
Well, I'll tell you, early on, one of the Easter eggs was we're very transparent about the blend, but we didn't come out and say it's a reconstructed mash bill. So having the blend on there was almost an Easter egg in and of itself. Writing the mash bill on, or writing the blending bill and having it reference a mash bill. Some folks thought maybe that was an Easter egg. The coin on the top, which has the only indication really of Eric's involvement, is an obscure quote on the bottom of a coin glued to the cork. It's about as far away from a celebrity whiskey, as you could do. But and then the WJ inside of the Eagle, some folks, took them a minute to find those as well. And I think the more you study the brand and look at what's going on over here, the more things that will become apparent.
I like it. I like it a lot. I like it a lot. Well, what else you got, Ari? You got anything else? Anything I didn't ask you that I should have asked you?
Oh man, I've had such a nice time hanging out with you.
I've honestly, this has been so fun. It's, you know what? Like, because I like to think of myself, I'm just a dude who likes whiskey, and I don't get this sort of insight myself. And I honestly have thought of myself this entire episode as just a viewer in the chat, because I've just been so intrigued by everything you've had to say. So I've had a great time. I really hope the other people have too. The insight, I love the insight. I think my favorite thing gathering from you is just stuff that people don't get to hear about that goes on. The freaking coin glued on there, but even how you blended it, all of that. That's just stuff you don't hear about, what goes into it. What all we get is just, well, here's a bottle. This guy made it. Well, if they even hear that, here's a bottle. There you go. That's what you get. Here's the label. You don't get the behind the scenes, this is what I thought, this is what I felt, this is what I tasted. I think it's really cool.
I'm glad you enjoy it. We have a phenomenal team from the bottom to the top. From everyone involved here is super committed to challenging expectations of what a spirits company ought to do, what it can be, bringing ideas to a bottle rather than just producing the same thing in a different bottle. Really, we have a wonderful group of people that's trying to push a lot of ideas forward and make them accessible to more whiskey folks. And then we'll see what happens after that. But we have a lot of really interesting projects and concepts and products that we look forward to sharing with you and coming back on and discussing.
Well, the fact if this is your starter, I can't wait where it goes. If this is what comes out the gate, I'm all for it. I mean, I'm telling you, man. I think you know, I'm not trying to blow smoke up yet, but I think you're honestly, what I like the most about you, Ari, is that you care. And it shows. It genuinely shows. For whenever, I'm telling you, and I'm doing this just because I love this bottle. When you go and get this bottle, guys, I think you will see. This isn't just a celebrity bottle, another whatever. It's a team of people who give a crap about whiskey. That's what I care about. Do you care about making something good? Yes, there you go. That's what you get. I really appreciate that.
Oh, good. And corn and whiskey, welcome to the party.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I pulled that up. We were gonna get to that. Where's the distribution?
This is the wave of the future, people. The distribution is online primarily, unless you live in the great state of Tennessee, where you can go to reputable liquor dealers. Then just go to the website, whiskeyjypsi.com, go to the Buy It Now button, and the bottle will be delivered promptly. That's it. And you could also go to the stores of some various curators on social media, including folks like CummingWhiskey.com. And if not right now, then very soon at BuySomeWhiskey.com, which, for my money, is one of the best whiskey stores on the entire internet.
Hey, we're going to, so yes, I want you guys to go wherever you can go and get it. And here's the thing, I like to be straight up with people. the price of this bottle, 200 bucks. It is not cheap. I get that. I know a lot of you are like, wow, that's not cheap. I will not tell anyone to go spend $200 if you can't spend $200. I think if you are that person who that is your budget, I think you need to get the whole this is a celebrity whiskey thing out of your head. I'll be straight up honest. Like anytime I see a celebrity attached to something, my brain goes there. This is not that. You know what I'm saying? I think this is a whiskey curated by people who actually care about making good whiskey. And Eric Church just so happens to be a great guy who loves whiskey and is part of this. So there you go. I wouldn't even call this a celebrity whiskey. I would call this just a whiskey that Eric Church is with. There you go.
Well said. I couldn't have said it better.
That's the way I feel about it, to be honest. After drinking Snoop Dogg's wine, we all get burned a little,
Shout out to Snoop Dogg, though.
I like Snoop Dogg. I like this wine, too, to be honest.
we do love Snoop. We do love Snoop. Would be interesting to see him get in the whiskey game someday.
So, that being said, my top priority is about to get this sucker on our store. Just so if any of our people, and by any of my people, want this, we have a direct access. Here you go. We'll get that on there. Other than that, I just wanted to seriously thank you for coming on. This Ari is the first time I've ever had someone, in my opinion, as important as you on my channel. Not gonna lie.
It's been a total pleasure. I thought we were going to talk for like 20 minutes, and here we are 2 hours later. And we could go all night. I swear we could go all night. I'm going to be respectful for your time, though.
I had a feeling we weren't going to go that. I knew this was going to go. I just didn't know how far we would take this.
Yeah. I want to give a shout out to your. Listen, you have earned an audience of really passionate, knowledgeable, folks that care about whiskey, that care about your perspective, and congratulations on building that, and thank you for inviting me to come and take a part of it. Appreciate it.
This has been awesome, man. And seriously, I'm behind you guys on this because it genuinely is a good product. So I can't wait for other people to kind of be exposed to this and to try it and to see where you guys go. Because I don't know, man. I'm telling you that if this is what you come out the gate on, I don't know what you're going to come out with next. I feel like you guys got some stuff up your sleeves.
Yeah, we do.
Good.
We'll come back and talking about it in the future.
All right. Well, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. There's been several new people. We've had some, appears to be some like Eric Church, like crew members in here. You guys are killing it. Thanks
Shout
for
out
coming
to the crew.
out.
He keeps good company,
I was gonna say there's been some people in here I've never seen before, and they're all about the whole crew thing. So thanks for tuning in, and thanks for joining, Ari. That being said, this is a wrap, guys, and we'll keep it sweet and simple. There's links in the description for me. I'll go back and add the stores you can buy Whiskey Jypsi from to the description. And I'll see you guys tomorrow because I do this. I I go live every Friday too. So we just keep the party going. So let's wrap her up. Ari, when I end the stream, you'll just go backstage with me and we can close it out from there. So
Excellent.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers,
Thank
guys.
you, everyone. Happy Labor Day.
It's Labor Day weekend. We kicking off the weekend, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're doing.